The glass chimed against silver, sharp enough to silence the room. Frank McKay stood at the center of the gathering, his posture calm, practiced, the kind of confidence that came from being obeyed for decades. He lifted his drink and let the pause stretch until every eye turned toward him. To my son, Dylan. His voice carried easily across the room, warm and unquestioned. The future steward of the entire McKay portfolio. Applause rose immediately. Chairs shifted. Smiles widened. Dylan accepted it all with a relaxed grin, already nodding as if the decision had been inevitable. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. Someone else murmured congratulations about vision and legacy. I stood near the edge of the room, fingers wrapped around a slim folder, watching the celebration gather speed without me. This is an original story written by the author of the Revenge Pulse channel, built from familiar social issues with the purpose of helping viewers reflect, heal, and draw meaningful lessons. The content is not intended to depict any real individual, Frank continued, voice growing more confident with every cheer. He spoke about growth, discipline, responsibility. He spoke about a portfolio valued at approximately $27 million as if it were a single, solid thing, rather than 8 years of late nights and quiet repairs stitched together by someone no one bothered to look at. Dylan lifted his glass in return. I won't let you down. The promise floated easily, weightless. I stepped closer to the family attorney, Thomas Keene, who was already scanning the room, calculating reactions. My voice stayed low, controlled. You might want to review the recording dates again. His brow tightened. Attention sharpening for the first time that evening. Frank's gaze finally landed on me, brief and irritated, as if a light had flickered where it wasn't supposed to. Sarah. The name carried the mild impatience reserved for background noise. We're celebrating. The word echoed. Celebrating. Around us, laughter resumed. Someone poured more wine. A cousin leaned toward Dylan, whispering plans that assumed permanence. I stayed where I was. The folder felt heavier than paper. Before the night moved on, before the story was locked in their version of events, I wanted to know who was listening, not the people in this room, but the ones outside it, the ones who understood what it meant to be useful without being seen. If this story reaches you, leave a quiet mark. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is when you hear this moment begin, because this was only the toast, and everything that followed would change the way they remembered it. People like to believe silence means consent. In my family, silence meant efficiency. While the applause from the toast faded into casual chatter, I stayed still, letting the room reorganize itself around Dylan. Investors angled closer to him. A cousin offered a drink. Someone joked about how early leadership suited him. No one looked my way long enough to wonder why I hadn't moved. This is your night, Frank reminded Dylan, pride settling into his voice like ownership. Get comfortable being at the center. Dylan laughed, easy and unburdened. I've been ready. Ready. The word landed softly, as if preparation happened by accident. Thomas Keene drifted toward the sideboard, documents already forming a mental list behind his eyes. We'll formalize next week. His tone suggested routine, not urgency. Clean transition. Clean. That word followed me through the years. I learned early that visibility was optional. Results were not. When a rental inspection nearly shut down 3 properties at once, my name never appeared in the email chain. When contractors threatened delays, my phone rang before sunrise. When zoning language needed rewriting overnight, the work landed on my desk without ceremony. At dinner parties, I became the quiet one, the reliable one, the daughter who didn't need managing. Sarah's good with details, Frank often remarked, a compliment that functioned like a fence. She prefers the background, preferred, as if it were a choice. Once, an investor mistook me for staff and asked for more wine. Dylan noticed and smiled instead of correcting him. She's always helping out. He offered kindness coded in dismissal. helping out. 8 years reduced to a hobby. Standing there, listening to them plan a future built on my labor, I understood something that settled deep and permanent. They didn't resent me. They didn't underestimate me. They forgot me. Invisibility isn't loneliness, it's erasure. Furniture doesn't get thanked for holding a room together. Infrastructure only matters when it fails. And I had been holding everything for a very long time. Not anymore. The version of the story they liked to tell began with Dylan's ambition. Frank repeated it often, usually to guests who nodded along. My son understands growth, risk, expansion. The words carried pride, as if vision alone kept buildings standing. What never made it into those conversations was the part where my phone rang at 4 a.m. because a heating system failed in the North Rental, or the part where a city inspector flagged a compliance issue that could have shut down 3 properties before summer. Those calls never went to Dylan. "Just handle it," Frank would mutter whenever I flagged a problem. "You're better with this stuff. Betterment available. Betterment invisible." For 8 years. I managed lease renewals, vendor contracts, insurance disputes, and regulatory filings. When a contractor tried to inflate a bid by nearly half because the McKay name sat on the paperwork, I pushed back until the numbers matched reality. When cash flow tightened during an off-season, I restructured payment schedules quietly, making sure no one felt the strain. Dylan felt none of it. "I've got meetings in Miami next week," he announced one spring, already halfway out the door. Big opportunities. Those opportunities later showed up as expense reports tied to high-end hotels and consultation fees with no deliverables. When I flagged the discrepancies, Frank waved it off. That's how deals get made. A deal, apparently, was anything that kept Dylan feeling important. At a quarterly review, I laid out projections showing steady stabilization across the portfolio. Thomas Keene glanced through the pages, impressed despite himself. This kind of consistency doesn't happen by accident. Frank leaned back, satisfied. That's my son learning fast. Dylan accepted the praise with a grin that didn't bother hiding its relief. Couldn't have done it without the team, singular, me. At a charity dinner, a city council member congratulated Dylan on finishing a renovation under budget. Dylan laughed and accepted the credit like a birthright. Across the table, my hands still bore faint marks from hauling binders through inspections that week. "Relax," Dylan murmured afterward, noticing my exhaustion for the first time that night. "You worry too much. Worry had nothing to do with it. Responsibility did. When something went right." Dylan was praised for leadership. When something nearly went wrong, I was handed the fix with a quiet expectation that it would disappear by morning. Frank trusted me with access, not authority. Dylan was given authority without understanding. Between them, the system worked only because I absorbed the consequences. They called it loyalty. They called it family. I called it maintenance. And maintenance, I had learned, never earns a place at the table. The meeting happened in Frank's office, the same room where every real decision had always been made. No ceremony, no witnesses, just a desk between us and years of unspoken hierarchy settling into place. I laid the reports out carefully, pages aligned, projections clean. This quarter closed stronger than any we've had since the last expansion. My voice stayed even. Stability is finally consistent across the portfolio. Frank skimmed the first page, interest flickering briefly. Good. Approval landed lightly, already fading. That's what I expect. I took a breath I had been holding for months. I want to formalize my role. That earned a glance. Not curiosity confusion. I'm not asking for control. The clarification came quickly. I'm asking for recognition. Minority equity. A documented stake that reflects the responsibility I already carry. The room went quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Frank leaned back, studying me the way someone studies a familiar object they hadn't noticed aging. Equity. A short laugh followed, sharp and dismissive. You're already compensated. The word landed wrong. Compensated how housing, security, and education without debt His tone hardened, as if listing expenses settled the matter. Those things cost money. They were never payment for running the business. Don't confuse effort with ownership. His gaze sharpened. You don't build assets, Sarah. You maintain them. Something in my chest went cold. Maintenance kept this portfolio alive when it should have collapsed. That's your job. He waved a hand. Final. And you're good at it. But partners take risks. You manage details. Details. 8 years reduced to a footnote. I'm not asking to replace Dylan. That's good, Frank replied, relief cutting through irritation, because that was never an option. The truth settled fully then, not as anger, not as shock, as clarity. I built value here. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Frank stood, signaling the conversation's end. You benefited from being here. That's enough. Don't push this further. I gathered the papers, hands steady. No argument followed, no defense, no appeal. Leaving the office felt different from every other time. The door closed behind me without ceremony, but something essential had ended. I didn't go to my room. I didn't cry. I went to my desk and opened the folder I had kept locked away, the one that held records instead of hope. That was the night I stopped asking to be seen and started preparing to let go. After that night, nothing changed on the surface. Frank still forwarded issues without context. Dylan still announced plans without details. Meetings still ended with my inbox filling quietly, efficiently. The difference lived entirely inside me. 26 months passed without confrontation. During that time, Dylan's decisions grew louder. A speculative investment surfaced first, pitched as innovation. Frank framed it as vision. When the loss landed nearly $1,800,000 spread across rushed deals and abandoned strategies, panic stayed contained, funneled straight to me. Just keep this from escalating, Frank instructed. Urgency sharpened but controlled. We don't need noise. Noise cost credibility. Credibility protected value. I created the stabilization account shortly after. Not hidden, documented. Justified as temporary liquidity designed to prevent defaults and preserve asset integrity. Every transfer carried notes. Every advance carried a return condition. It wasn't generosity. It was containment. Dylan never noticed the difference. Everything's fine, he announced one afternoon, feet propped on my desk without permission. The numbers look great. They look balanced. The correction stayed neutral. That's not the same thing. He waved it off. Confidence untethered. That's why you're here. You're here. Not partner. Not family. Function. Thomas Keene reviewed quarterly summaries with increasing focus. This level of internal discipline suggests someone is absorbing a lot of risk. That's the job. I replied evenly. Only if you're protected. His voice lowered. Which you're not. The warning registered. It simply came too late to matter. Each month added another entry. Backdated approvals, expense reallocations, decisions made in Dylan's name that I quietly neutralized before they reached daylight. I wasn't fixing mistakes anymore. I was documenting patterns. Frank mistook the absence of crisis for success. See, satisfaction crept into his tone. This system works. It worked because I held it together. At family dinners, conversations skimmed past me. Plans were discussed as if I were part of the furniture. Dylan talked about expansion, about entertaining investors, about legacy. I listened, cataloging the distance between performance and reality. Silence can look like patience. It can feel like obedience. What they never understood was that silence can also be withdrawal. The slow, deliberate act of letting responsibility loosen its grip. I stopped anticipating their needs. I stopped cushioning the impact before it landed. The stabilization account remained open but untouched, its balance a temporary mercy with an expiration date. They mistook my quiet for loyalty. They didn't realize it was preparation. Dylan found me near the edge of the room, buoyed by applause that hadn't cooled yet. His confidence had sharpened since the toast. Edges newly bold. Big night. The words carried a grin that expected agreement. I'm already thinking about upgrades. Upgrades tend to have consequences. The reply stayed measured. He waved a hand, dismissive. Everything does. That's ownership. Ownership. The word rolled too easily. I cleared the guest cottage this morning. He added, casual, almost bored. Needed space for hosting. The air tightened, cleared. Patricia packed up. His tone softened in a way that didn't reach his eyes. She made it difficult, a lot of stories. But sentimentality slows progress. Patricia Lewis had lived there for years, 81 and precise, her routines stitched into the place. My grandmother had insisted on the clause herself, lifetime residency, no exceptions. I had enforced it quietly, the way I enforced most promises in this family. She has a lifetime right. The reminder came steady. It's documented. Dylan shrugged. Documents change. They don't. The correction cut clean. People do. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if kindness could be rehearsed. She's at a roadside lodge off U.E.S. Route 50. Temporary. We'll cover a few weeks. A few weeks won't replace a home. My jaw tightened. You displaced her to make room for cigars. Don't dramatize. Impatience crept in. She's old. Change happens. Change. The word landed like a verdict. You crossed a line. The boundary formed fully. Not a financial one. Dylan's smile thinned. Careful. You're not in charge anymore. The certainty in his voice rested on assumptions I no longer carried. That clause exists to protect people. The words stayed calm, not to inconvenience you. He straightened, posture hardening. This is exactly why Dad never gave you authority. You get attached. Attached to a promise, to a person. I enforce terms. The response held. That's the difference. He stepped back, already turning away. Clean up the mess. The order drifted over his shoulder. You're good at that. I watched him disappear into congratulations and champagne. The decision settled without ceremony. I would not clean this one. Some lines aren't financial. They're human. And once crossed, the cost stops being negotiable. The room settled into that false calm that follows applause. When people believe the story has already been written, Frank stood surrounded by nods and approval. Dylan moved easily between guests, collecting congratulations like proof of ownership. I stepped forward before the momentum could harden. There's a procedural issue that needs clearing. My voice carried without force, precise enough to cut through the chatter. Frank turned, irritation surfacing first. Not now. It won't wait. The answer came evenly. Thomas Keene shifted closer. Attention fully engaged now. Papers appeared in my hands, laid out on the nearest table with deliberate care. Deeds, amendments, county recordings, no dramatics, just sequence. These filings were recorded 26 months ago. I continued, tapping the top page. Not last week, not tonight. Dylan laughed once, sharp and dismissive. You're confused. Check the signatures, Thomas murmured, already scanning. His expression tightened, then stilled. Frank reached for the papers, disbelief bleeding into anger. This isn't possible. It is. My voice didn't rise. The portfolio was transferred into an irrevocable management trust. The room went quiet in layers. Frank's face drained slowly. I never agreed to this. You retained public authority. The clarification landed calmly. Operational control was separated. By design. Dylan stepped closer, glass forgotten in his hand. You think this gives you power? I've had power. The correction stayed soft. You had access. Thomas looked up, measured. The trust structure is valid. The filings are clean. A murmur rippled through the guests. Investors leaned back. Smiles faltered. Dylan's confidence cracked. Just enough. So what? You run things now. I've been running things. The truth settled heavy. You were performing ownership. Frank's voice sharpened. You manipulated us. No, the response held steady. I absorbed you. Silence pressed in. Not shock. Recognition. I slid another document forward. The stabilization account closes tonight. Every advance logged as temporary support. That support ends. Dylan's breath hitched. You can't do that. I can. The answer came without heat. And I am. He searched the room for allies and found none willing to meet his eyes. This is about the old woman, isn't it? It's about terms. My gaze didn't waver. And consequences. Thomas cleared his throat, voice professional but strained. Given this information, any actions taken this morning may constitute violations. Frank turned on Dylan, fury uncontained now. What did you do? Dylan backed away. Bravado dissolving. I optimized assets. You erased a person. The words landed flat. The room no longer belonged to them. It never had. I gathered the documents, control complete without spectacle. The trust doesn't punish. I added quietly. It corrects. No one applauded. No one moved. The story they had toasted finally collapsed under its own weight. Dylan broke the silence with a laugh that arrived half a beat too late. You're enjoying this, confidence straining to reassert itself. But you missed something. He reached into his jacket and unfolded a single page, holding it up like proof of victory, a revised power of attorney. Signed 2 days before Grandma passed. Durable. Immediate. Relief flickered across Frank's face. She chose him. The words rushed out, desperate to land somewhere solid. Thomas Keene hesitated, eyes scanning the page. The signature appears consistent. I stepped closer, attention fixed on the date. October 14th. I noted calmly. That timing matters. Dylan smiled wider. It matters because it ends this. A second folder slid onto the table, thinner but heavier in consequence. Hospital records. My voice stayed level. Intensive care unit. Same date. Thomas read silently. His jaw tightened. Sedated. Intubated. Medically restrained. She couldn't sign anything. The truth settled without emphasis. The page trembled in Dylan's hand. That's not. That document doesn't override a trust, Thomas interrupted, stepping back. It creates exposure. Frank's anger finally turned sharp and personal. What did you do? Dylan's composure cracked. Words spilled out fast now. I needed leverage. Creditors were closing in. Nearly $1,200,000. They wanted assurance. You used a forgery. Frank breathed. Horror overtaking denial. I used what I had. Dylan shot back, panic rising. You told me to protect the assets by committing fraud. Thomas cut in, voice cold. In front of witnesses, the room shifted again, this time away from Dylan completely. I closed the folder gently. This ends tonight. The statement held no triumph. Not with force, with records. Dylan stared, searching for mercy that no longer existed. You could fix this. I already did. The answer came quietly. Just not for you. No one followed as I turned away. The collapse continued behind me, loud enough to hear without looking back. The fallout didn't arrive with sirens or shouting. It came in stages, the way consequences usually do. Weeks later, Thomas Keene called once. His voice sounded older. The trust has entered court-supervised restructuring. Creditors are lining up. Your role is complete. Then it's done. The reply stayed calm. Frank never called. Dylan tried once, a message left late at night. His voice smaller than I remembered. I didn't return it. Silence had already done its work. Patricia Lewis moved into a small ground-floor apartment arranged through the trust's remaining protections. When I helped her unpack, She held my hand longer than necessary. You kept your word. The gratitude carried more weight than any title ever had. I did, and this time, it was enough. My own place is modest. 1 bedroom. A lease with my name printed clearly at the top. No keys I'm responsible for except my own. The quiet here feels earned. Sometimes people ask if it was worth it. Losing family, losing access, losing the illusion of belonging. I don't explain that nothing was taken from me. I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. There's a strange peace in choosing yourself without cruelty, in letting systems collapse instead of propping them up with your spine, in learning that love built on obligation isn't love at all. If any part of this story feels familiar, pause for a moment. Notice where you're listening from. Notice the time. Notice what you've been holding together without help. Leaving a small mark, a comment, a quiet acknowledgement. It reminds you that you're not alone in recognizing the pattern. I didn't win a house. I didn't claim a legacy. I reclaimed my breath. And when the weight finally left my shoulders, I understood something simple and final some families don't break when you walk away. They were already broken. You were just the one keeping the cracks from showing.